Hello, welcome to the first module, the online module in the CHIC MBA program. As you know, we're starting with this course, Management 501. I think this is going to be a great learning experience for all of us. I have asked you to do more reading in this particular module than for the other modules, but I think it's important that first of all we have a good understanding of what organizational behavior is and what international management is. So I've asked you to read chapters 1 and 2, but also today what we're going to talk about in particular is culture. What is culture? Somebody said that culture, in fact, is a little bit like a song, or trying to explain a culture to somebody is a little bit like trying to explain a song to somebody without singing it to them, without them being able to hear the music. A very difficult thing to do. How can you explain a song if the person can't hear it? And culture in a way is very, very similar. It's difficult for us to be able to explain another culture if we've not lived in that culture for a very long time. I have a good friend at SM, his name is François Deschmaker, okay, who had a human resource firm in Paris for many, many years. And here at SM for our classes for our students in second years in human resources, the last class I always invited François Deschmaker to come into the class, and we said to François Deschmaker, we asked him the question, we said, when you looked for somebody to be an expatriate, to go for your company to another country and manage in that other country, what is the very most important thing that that individual needs to have in terms of skill or personality or whatever? And François Deschmaker's response was very quick, and he said the most important thing that an individual needs when they go to another country to work is humility. Humility, one of the values of SM. But what is humility? Humility is the ability to be able to try and understand how something that's done in another culture or another organization could have merit, and that perhaps my own ideas about management are not the best in the world. When we're dealing with culture, it's a very sensitive thing. If we walk into another culture and we try and impose our management style on that other culture, it's not going to be accepted very well. We have lots and lots of examples of managers from one culture that go into another culture who have failed in their assignment because they were unable to adapt to the new culture. What is culture anyway? Culture is our vibes, okay, our values, our attitudes, our behaviors, and our expectations. When we criticize, for example, another culture, we go into a culture and we say, they do this poorly, they're not very good at that. What is that like? That's as if we've taken a great big double-edged sword out of its sheath, and we take that sword and we stab it into the heart of the person in that culture. Because when we attack another person's culture, we're attacking the thing that is the very most important and dear to them. This is why it's so important as international managers that we try and respect the individual and the culture that the individual comes from. Whether it's us that goes to the other country or whether we have employees coming from various cultural areas around the world. When I said earlier in the introduction, if you looked at the introduction to this course, that when we talk about culture, we have various ways of looking at culture. And I said sometimes people think that culture just means difficulty. But there's another way to look at culture. Culture is also a strategic advantage. I've had many times in my teaching at SM through the years, the last 12, 13 years that I've been at SM School of Business and Management, where I put teams together in the different classrooms, and I built teams that were made up of individuals from different countries. And then the other teams, I just kept the national culture. You know what? The international teams always won. They always did a better job than the teams that were from the same culture. The reason for that is simple. When we come from another culture, we're able to see things from this direction. Another individual sees things from this direction. Somebody else looks at it from this direction, and we're able to see better how to improve and to come up with a more complete product or service. That's the advantage of cultural diversity, because we get people that can look at things from a different perspective. So in this particular module, besides just looking at the basic ideas of organizational behavior, which can be motivation, leadership, power, what are the power bases, okay, political activities within an organization, because even if we don't like politics, politics is all about trying to get people to like us. Because if people don't like us, they're not going to want to move in our direction. And our job as managers is to get people to start moving in the direction that we want them to move. Okay? I might talk to you a little bit about difficult people when you come on site, okay, to the courses and tour. And who are difficult people? Difficult people are the people that don't do the things that we want them to do. Or they're the people that do the things that we don't want them to do. And our job as managers is to get those that do the things that we don't want them to do to stop doing the things that we don't want them to do. And those that aren't doing the things that we want them to do to start doing the things that we want them to do. Did you get that? Okay, we'll go over that in a little bit more detail. But already, even for people within our own culture, we need to be able to understand how people are different. They're motivated differently, etc. And so we also want to consider the international differences in motivation. To give you a very quick example, McDonald's, when they went to China, they used to have this idea that we're going to reward the employee of the month by putting their picture up on the wall and saying employee of the month and giving that individual a certain bonus, an additional amount of money. Well, when they did this in China and they chose an employee of the month, that employee was so embarrassed. Why? Because China is a collectivist culture. We don't do things for individual gain. We do things together. And it was an embarrassment for that individual to have received something and to have been put up above the rest of the group. That's just one example, but there's many examples in every culture how people are not motivated in the same way. So we want to take a closer look at those things. We will take a look at power distance, for example. In some countries, we see that different people in the organization have different levels of power. In France, for example, it's very important for people to know who is my boss, who can tell me what to do, and who am I responsible for as an individual. And the French are very comfortable with power distance. If you look at the research in France, people have no problem with power distance. But if we were to go to Sweden, the Swedish people would be horrified to think that people are not treated at exactly the same level within an organization. Okay, so we could talk about uncertainty avoidance, individualism, masculinity, femininity. Okay, all of these issues are very important if we're going to understand different people that come from different areas around the world. And our own company, what is our company's policies going to be? Are we going to have an ethnocentric policy, a regiocentric policy, a polycentric policy, or a geocentric policy? It depends maybe on the stages that our organization is going through in terms of international business. Whether we're just at the point of beginning to sell our product or service to another country, or whether we've actually moved our physical manufacturing to that company and we've set up house in that country, or whether our organization is so big now, transnational or multinational, that we're all over the world. So we want to look at some of these issues, and especially I want you to dig in deep to the cultural dimensions in Chapter 3 of this book. I've given you some additional things to look at on the website, and I'm going to ask you to do some activities that make you think very, very hard about your own culture. I personally believe that we cannot understand another person's culture until we first of all understand our own culture. As an American, for example, I didn't realize how individualistic an American is. When you grow up in a culture, you think all cultures are like that. But no, Americans are very individualistic. When our children turn 18 years old in the United States, we kick them out the front door. We say goodbye, or otherwise, if you want to stay in my house, you can start paying me rent. How surprised was I to learn that in France or in other European countries, many times the parents not pay for the child's housing, they pay for their schooling, they help them buy a car, and they help them buy a house. And then I realized I was one poor, broke man. So study hard and finish your assignments. You can either send them to me as you finish them, or you group them all together and send them to me. All that information is on the learning platform. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to send me an email or give me a Skype call. I'd love to hear from you and answer any of the questions that you might have. So see you next time in Module 2.